Alistair, thank you so much and good afternoon everyone. I should just remind you that I was 7 years of age when I started at Channel 7. I did have a couple of years working in Vegas for Channel 9, and it's always great to be on the Gold Coast in this beautiful part of the world. Look, good afternoon everyone, and thank you so much for the honour of addressing the Associated Christian Schools Leadership Summit here in this beautiful part of the world. I want to particularly acknowledge Eric, of course, Alistair, and also Leighton Cuss. Your conference theme is Leading in Love and Unity, and this is also your mission, to lead your schools and school communities with a common purpose for the common good, bound in a uniquely Christian education. Christian faith, we understand, on our side of politics, is at the very heart of Christian schools. It's what makes your schools different. It's the reason why parents choose to send their children to a Christian school. Like all faith-based schools in this country, the Coalition stands shoulder to shoulder with you, supporting your mission, celebrating your achievements, and respecting your freedoms. The freedom to educate one's children in accordance with one's faith is inseparable from the freedom to worship in accordance with one's beliefs. This is not just a matter of common sense. This is also a matter of international law. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights provides that signatory states should undertake to have respect for the liberty of parents and, when applicable, legal guardians to ensure the religious and moral education of their children in conformity with their own convictions. The rights of Australian parents to send their children to a school which genuinely adheres to the tenets and beliefs of their faith is essential to the exercise of their religious freedom. On this fundamental right, I would like to say that we are proud to be leading in love and unity in Canberra, but sadly, as you might have noticed, that is not the case. The future of faith-based schools should not be caught up in partisan politics, but sadly over the last couple of years we have seen your faith in your future tested. It has really been wonderful to support ACS along with Christian Schools Australia and Australian Association of Christian Schools at your Faith in Our Future town hall meetings across the country, and I was really honoured to join Alistair and others on stage, and Alistair did an incredible job at explaining the perils of the Albanese government's proposed amendments to the Sex Discrimination Act, along with its proposed religious discrimination bill. Proposals, I might add, to change the law, which are still secret. These bills have been provided to the Shadow Attorney General, Senator Michaelia Cash, on the condition they cannot be distributed or made public. I haven't seen them, and while there has been some consultation, it has been very, very limited. In many respects, the consultation has been in the dark, and this is no way to build faith in your future. As I've said before, and I'll reiterate it again, the right to employ staff in accordance with your tenets and beliefs and values is fundamental to Christian schools and Christian families which make up your school communities, just as it is fundamental to schools and families of every faith, whether they be Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, Hindi, so on. As the Shadow Attorney General said in a letter to Attorney General Mark Dreyfus on the 11th of July 2024, in April this year, the Prime Minister made a commitment that protections for people of faith will not go backwards while I am Prime Minister of Australia. However, the feedback that we have both received from faith leaders who have seen the legislation is clear. If the amendments to the Sex Discrimination Act and the proposed religious discrimination bill were enacted as currently drafted, there would be a very real and substantial reduction in existing legal and operational freedoms for religious educational institutions. As has been expressed to us both, faith communities would go a long way backwards. The Coalition understands that faith-based schools are not seeking to discriminate, but we understand that you cannot build a community of faith unless you share the values of your faith with your community. So, as you might know, the government called for bipartisanship in terms of its proposed changes to the law. However, bipartisanship would be a very dangerous road if the Coalition was to jump on board the government's current proposed changes, because, as I've just said, these changes take your schools well and truly backwards, and certainly not forwards. As the Shadow Minister for Education, I have met with many school and faith leaders, and I have been incredibly impressed with the way schools handle difficult issues, challenging issues, and they do so with empathy and with tolerance and with love. When I spoke at the Faith in Our Future rally in Melbourne, I urged more than 1,200 people to raise their voice to the roof, to the skies, to the heavens, because the bottom line is your voice matters. And I have to say, it is your voice which has resulted in the most controversial aspects of the Queensland Government's Respect at Work and Other Matters Amendment Bill being withdrawn. So congratulations to you for your efforts. This is democracy in action. Though can I add that no matter the last-minute reshaping of these laws, Premier Stephen Miles' agenda is clear, and I have to say, for that he should not be rewarded in October. Just as I don't believe the Albanese government should be rewarded for the uncertainty and confusion to which faith-based and independent schools have been subjected over the last couple of years. In his famous We Believe statement on the 10th anniversary of the creation of the Liberal Party in 1954, Australia's longest-serving Prime Minister Robert Menzies emphasised the core values of liberalism. The great human freedoms, he said, included the power to speak, to choose, to be ambitious, to be independent, to be industrious, to acquire skill, to seek and earn reward. And importantly, he reflected on the fundamental right to worship. On many other occasions during his long tenure as Prime Minister, Robert Menzies said religious freedom must mean freedom for everyone, regardless of their faith, stating that to deny this freedom would be a regression to the dark ages of man. At a citizenship ceremony in Perth in 1961, he declared to an audience of new Australians that whatever religion they may profess, they had come to a country where people were free to pray as we want to pray, to speak as we want to speak, and to assemble as we want to assemble. It's not hard to know what Menzies might say if he could see what's happening at the moment, if he was alive today. In this day and age, in 2024, non-government schools, religious education, and the rights of parents to choose are under attack like never before. Just a few days ago, I joined with the Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor in calling on the Albanese government to immediately rule out the abolition of tax-deductible donations for religious education in schools. The government's silence over a Productivity Commission recommendation to abolish deductible gift recipient status for special religious education is deeply concerning for families of faith who send their children to a government school. Of course, these programs are embedded in non-government schools and schools of faith, but government schools very much rely on these public donations to support these very important programs. The recommendation was included in the government's Future Foundations for Giving report, along with the equally callous recommendation that tax-deductible school building funds be abolished, along with school library and scholarship funds. While the government has ruled out ending school building funds and other sorts of similar funds, which underpin $3 billion of investment in non-government schools every year, and that's investment for both constructing new buildings as well as maintenance of buildings, Families who rely on special religious education or ethics education programs which receive no government funding know now where they sit in the pecking order of government priorities. They do not matter. It is estimated at least half of all faith-based Australian families, including those of Christian, Catholic, Jewish and Muslim faith, send their children to a government school. So we say it is vital the government supports parental choice and the right of children to receive specialist religious instruction no matter where they go to school. At a time when Labor is taxing Australians at record levels, the Treasurer Jim Chalmers' own review is calling to increase taxes. We believe this is a cynical, political and divisive proposal from a government which has spent years dividing Australians with ideological distractions. Rather than address cost of living, Labor regrettably is focused on attacking religious education and faith-based charities. The government's $50 million teaching scholarship program is also fostering division and discrimination. Scholarships worth up to $40,000 for undergraduate student teachers, unbelievably, are only available to those who intend to teach in government schools. Now, when this program was first announced, we supported it very strongly, but the government did not indicate at any stage that this would only be going to government schools. And this is a case of blatant discrimination, a direct attack on teacher choice, and also again on 1/3 of Australian parents who choose to send their child to a non-government school. It also ignores the reality of the teacher shortage crisis, which has exploded on Labor's watch, including in many regional and remote areas which are very strongly served by independent and faith-based schools. I have to say the Albanese government's education report card more broadly is not looking so flash. We are concerned that after 2 years there is still no national school reform agreement and no agreed reforms that we believe every young Australian deserves to reach his or her best potential. A back to basics education founded in explicit teaching and other evidence-based teaching methods. Instead, what we have seen is a full-blown funding war with the states. In saying that, I recognise that many schools are employing the best evidence-based teaching methods. And to your schools, I commend you for your work in that regard. But across the country, it is pretty dismal. 1 in 3 children are failing NAPLAN. And while some of the states are starting to recognise the merits of explicit teaching and things like the teaching of phonics, the explicit teaching of phonics, and they are starting to take some action, we have seen very little leadership from the Albanese government and Education Minister Jason Clare. This is made worse, these really dire results, and just remembering that 20 years ago the Program for International Student Assessment tells us that the average Year 10 student was 1 year ahead in their learning compared to now, so things have really gone backwards. This is exacerbated by the high levels of classroom disruption, which is making learning impossible for many students. So, according to the OECD's 2018 Index of Disciplinary Climate, Australia ranked amongst the lowest, 70 out of 77 countries, and that trajectory has been most recently reflected in the most recent PISA results as well. So we actually initiated a Senate inquiry into classroom disruption, made some very important recommendations like implementing a national behaviour curriculum, like rolling out a national behaviour survey, very much focused on the importance of teaching students how to behave, because when they're taught, amazingly, students do respond. It reminds me, I digress, as a parent myself, I was at a school function and my son was at a school, they wear a beautiful school uniform, and all the kids were filing in these magnificent school uniforms, but all their socks were down at their ankles. And I said to one of the teachers, why don't they pull their socks up? She said, oh, they just fall down again and they don't want to. And I said, but you know what? If you stood here as they file in for their music concert and you said, please pull your socks up, guess what? They would pull their socks up. So if children are not taught explicitly how to behave and what's expected of them, then you don't see those expectations fulfilled at schools. And again, I know this is something that is very close to your heart. The other concern that we have is that there's been scant regard to teaching codes of conduct which prevent activism in the classroom. Scant regard from the Education Minister and the current federal government. As I said in my very first media release in this role, the classroom is for education, not indoctrination, and we take that obligation very, very seriously. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your leadership, for your moral courage, and for all that you do for the students and families you serve, including, I might say, families who do not share your faith, but celebrate and support your values and teachings by choosing your schools for their child's education. On behalf of the Coalition, I look forward to continuing to stand shoulder to shoulder with Christian and other faith-based schools. Our word is our bond. Thank you.